Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here on time. Thanks for making this a priority. My name is Cuthbert Joseph. I am your tutor treasurer, and this is the first in a new series called Money Talks. Some of you are familiar with our Sunday school sessions, which was spearheaded by the first vice president, Mr. Seals, and we thought we'd use the same time slot. It's a similar idea. And of course, there's going to be no conflict. In fact, the month of the teacher, October is the month of the teacher. And during October, you will have several activities put on by the first vice president. There will be Sunday school sessions throughout the month of October. And there will be some collaboration, as one of the sessions during the month of October will focus on entrepreneurship as an option for teachers in dealing with their financial needs and personal interests. So again, thank you for making the time to be here this afternoon, and welcome to Money Talks. Money and financial planning are important issues for us as individual members and also for tutor as an organization. And over the course of the series, we're going to look at it in a way that helps us as individuals to reflect on what we should be doing and to develop ourselves so that we can do a better job of managing our finances, and also give us the opportunity to look at what's happening with tutor as an organization, how we use our finances and manage the resources of our members to the best possible ends. Coming in as treasurer, it was my intention to use the available technology to share this kind of information with our members and to create an interactive forum for us to be able to do that. So I'm very glad to be able to start that at this time. First session, we're not going to be able to answer all of the questions or even to touch on all of the issues, but it is an introduction to what we want to do. So it's not going to be a weekly program. As I said, this is our introduction. We will have one that focuses on entrepreneurship during the month of the teacher. And in November, we'll come back and do a couple of sessions again, maybe one every other week, looking at issues that are interesting to you, issues that are relevant to you, and seeking to answer some of those questions and share information that's going to be valuable to you as members. Over the course of the last few months, as National Treasurer, I would have been involved in organizing training for our Finance Committee, our Investment Management Committee, and even members of our Central Executive. And as part of that, I invited the gentleman who is going to be our guest this afternoon to feature, to present in one of our sessions. And this session is an extension of that conversation. We're looking at bringing some of those points, some of those ideas into the conversation with our wider membership. And over time, we hope that it will become a wider and deeper discourse, which will, as I said, help all of us in our respective journeys. So somewhere during the course of this afternoon, it's going to become clear that it starts with cash, right? And I'm sure that our guests will tell us a little bit more about the other kind of cash that not all of us are familiar with, but how important cash is in managing our finances. So let me take the opportunity now. Somebody's calling tutor's office on Sunday afternoon. Let me take the opportunity now to introduce Mr. Roel Rollocks. He's a consultant and financial coach. Mr. Roel Rollocks, as I said, presented in one of our sessions during our recent finance training. He's the founder of VisionWorks Solutions. He actually hosts his own virtual talk show called Financial Fridays. He had a session last Friday, and I'm sure he'll tell us a little bit about that during this afternoon's conversation. So, teachers, tutor members, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, and join me now in welcoming Mr. Roel Rollocks. Roel, how are you this afternoon? Sorry, 1 second again, Roel. So just to help us manage the exercise this afternoon, the mics, you will not be able to unmute yourselves, but at the appropriate time, you're invited to share in the chat. And depending on the size of the number of participants this afternoon, we might actually invite persons to activate their mics and share. Roll, how are you this afternoon?
Great, excellent, excellent. How am I coming through? Are you hearing me?
Loud and clear. Thanks for joining us.
Excellent, great. Good to be here.
So I just want to invite tell the participants a little bit about yourself and what you've been doing.
Well, let me first start by saluting the teachers here. The teachers to me are champions. You know, I come from a family of teachers. My mother taught, my dad taught at Mokrapo Senior Comprehensive in the early days. I have brothers who teach, a sister who teach, I teach, you know. So it's one of the professions, one of the noble professions that I respect, and I feel much more, you know, is needed to when you consider the contributions. I myself have a particular teacher. His name was George Martin. This was at St. Dominic's Primary School. This is in Mova, where I'm from. And I could tell you up to today, you know, all the persons who've been impacted by him call his name sometime of the week. You understand? So I just want to encourage you, and I'm happy to be here. You know, I too, like everyone else, have had my own challenges along the way. And when I share and I talk just not only from something that is, you know, you read, you know, in a book or you Google, but from my own personal experience. And no doubt along the way, I've spoken to hundreds of persons, maybe thousands of persons over the years, being in this profession for over 20 years. So a lot of what I share is an amalgam of what people are doing successfully. So great to be here, great to be a part, excited to be a part.
All right, well, thank you very much for making the time. We appreciate the input. Some persons might have been in the session we had in July where you joined us in our training, and we'll be looking forward to a little more of that. It was very well received, and I'm very glad to have you here today to be able to share with our members. Let me take the opportunity to say to our teachers here that over the coming months, we will be inviting, I'm sure we'll invite Roll back and other professionals from different places to share their expertise for our benefit. And just before the show started, the conversation started, Roll and I were chatting, and you know, we are aware of institutions in the public sector and in the private sector that are making training available in money management, financial planning. And so we're going to be sharing that information and using a collaborative approach to building up our capacity as individuals to treat with financial matters. So again, Roll, let's start off by setting expectations. I don't want anybody to come in and assume that we are going to be able to answer all the questions or everybody's personal questions this afternoon, but we're seeking to lay a foundation, to set the stage for what will come later. But certainly, I am confident that through this session, everybody's going to leave a little better. So tell us, Roll, can you share with participants when we talk about financial planning, because our conversation is about personal financial planning. What do we need? What is financial planning, and what's the objective of financial planning?
Well, the issue is here is that we don't just fall into financial well-being. You know, we don't just one day wake up and it arrives, you know. And you will find that some of it is a little bit more than common sense. There are some things that where common sense is gonna, you know, get you a long way in terms of achieving your financial goals, but there's a little bit more that you need to do in terms of researching and so forth. So from a financial planning perspective, we're talking about really a written plan, and that's the first thing. From our perspective, you can have something in your head, and that's a dream. You know, when you begin to translate that and put it on paper, and I know as teachers, you will understand this very clearly. When you begin to put this on paper and map it out, you begin to understand and see things a lot clearer. So from our perspective, it has to be written, right? And it has to be connected to the goals that you want to achieve in life, all right? One most important goal, apart from getting house, getting car, taking care of children, retiring, is the whole idea of financial independence. So I would say that that is one of the key aspects of a financial plan. So one of the ways of measuring what you're doing is to determine how is what you're doing, whatever plan you have in whatever state, how is it connected to creating financial independence for you? Of course, you would realize there, Mr. Joseph, is that you will need to define that. What does financial independence mean for you? You know, each person may have a different definition, but you need to wrestle with the issue. All right. So certainly this particular plan will have goals. These goals must be timed. All right. Because we have medium-term goals, short-term goals, long-term goals, and they must all be timed, right? And costed. So what you'll find coming out at the end of a financial planning document is a statement of savings required to achieve the various goals. You see what I'm saying? So at the end of this document, you have the goals outlined, and you have this is the amount of saving or investment at this particular rate that I have to do to accomplish all these things. All right. Of course, a financial plan must cater for contingencies. All right. So within that plan, this is sort of like your risk assessment, where you sit down and you assess your risk. And for each person, it's different. You know, some persons, because of their medical history, they have challenges in the family, so they have something different. Some people have more children, you know, so there all these issues come into us determining your level of risk and what you need to do to accomplish your goals in life. So that's the essential framework for a financial plan.
Thank you, Roel. And you mentioned a number of things there. Very importantly, of course, the idea of having a written plan. As you said, everybody has a sense of, you know, I'm getting a salary at the end of the month and there's certain things I want to do. But we've heard it said, I know many of us have heard it said, that if it's just in your head, it's a dream. Yes, you have to write it down. So thanks for reinforcing that point. Now, we're talking with teachers, and some of us have been in the service for 5 years, some of us have been in the service for 25 years. Is it that in a session like this, we can identify, you know, goals and strategies that would work for everybody? Or what is your general statement on that? If you're talking with a diverse group,
Yes.
what would be your take on that?
Well, there are some generic goals that we can speak to. So for example, financial independence, and that's really arriving at a place where your net worth, which is really your assets minus your liabilities, has grown to a point that it provides income that you're not reliant on a salary necessarily, or you're not reliant on somebody giving you a handout, all right? Where the funds that you have acquired can cater to your financial needs, all right? So that is like a general goal. Of course, another general goal would be retirement, all right? You find that as financial planners, we like to focus on this because it's one of the things that people wake up one day and say, wow, you know, I have to retire. By that time, it's too late. You know, one of the things I hope we get time to discuss is that there are three key variables that contribute to your financial independence. That's how much you save, the rate at which you're saving, and the time that you have. And you'll find that time is often the most important factor, unless, of course, you start very late, right? So there's a lot that we can achieve with little savings if we have time on our side, right? So that's another general goal. Another general goal is emergency fund. Now, before the pandemic, experts suggested between 3 to 6 months of your core expenses. So if you look at those things that are fixed, right? Whether it is paying your mortgage, paying your rent, you know, certain aspects of the food that you have to buy, you know, travel, communication. When you multiply that by 3 or by 6, it gives you a basic emergency fund. Now experts are saying that you probably need a year of that, which will be 12 months, right? So wherever you can find yourself, whether you'd go for 3 months or up to 12 months, you need to have an emergency fund set aside, all right? And that will be an essential goal, all right, that you'll need to have when you're putting your financial plan together, all right? Of course, within that, for each person, there will be things that will vary. And that's the challenge with sessions like these, you know. Some persons want to travel, some persons want to invest in business, some persons want to retire earlier. Some person saying, listen, man, I want to retire at 50, you know, that would mean a little tweaking to your particular situation to arrive at that. So of course, it's a little challenging, but those are some of the general things that, you know, people will be aiming at. For some persons, getting out of debt, becoming debt free is a goal, you know. So all those are the kind of things you'd want to look at. Another aspect of it is maximizing the return on your investment. So I often like to ask persons the question, what return are you getting at the various places that you have money? Whether we're looking at unit trust, whether we're looking at the credit union, you have money in the bank, in a mutual fund, in stocks, what is the return? You can't just arrive at financial independence if you don't understand these things. You have to know what is the return you're getting. How do you know that you're maximizing the return? Maybe you can get a better return somewhere else. When you juxtapose that with the rate of inflation, which is another question I ask oftentimes, people don't know, all right? You will find that you have to beat inflation. That's another key goal. So if inflation is hovering at about 2-3%, all right, and you're earning 1% in the bank or 2%, you see what's happening. Your money is actually losing value every year. So a key goal would be to beat inflation. So those are some general goals. Of course, there are more specific goals within there if you want to have a family, you want to have children, and so forth.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm sure that everybody here spotted something in there that he or she can identify with. Many of them will resonate with persons in the group. But you know, whether you're just coming into the service or you've been in it for a while, a couple of decades, like some of us have, you recognize that time flies, and that's where I think the importance of the plan comes in, because you know we have things in mind. Yes, I want to travel, I want to build a house, I want to start a business, but it's very easy if you don't have a deliberate plan and a written plan to lose track of things, and time flies. You made the point.
Yes, and it's
go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to add, it's really very difficult because there's so many goals with so many different time frames to do this in your head, you know. But when you begin to put it on paper, you begin to see how all the various things are connected, and once you've accomplished this can help with another goal. Writing it down is essential.
Right, and so you're signaling there that we don't just identify things, but we also need to look at what's going to happen short term, medium term, long term.
And long term, yes. And it's a very critical issue. You know, I was looking at some stats before, and let me just give a quick sense and why it underscores why it's so important, right? The stats are saying that by the age of retirement, right, of every 100 persons that retire, 60% are dependent or dead, you know, 60%. You understand what I'm saying? If we do that 60% of all the persons here, you know, the thinking is that 60% will fall into that category. 35% are still working. All right, 35%, and only 5% are financially independent. All right, and oftentimes this word that has been coined now called the working poor. You understand? You have a lot of people who are working not because they choose to, but because they have to, and they've retired. They haven't catered for inflation because inflation continues to eat into their money. Here's what the central bank says. The central bank says 1/3 of persons work over 60, 54%, all right, don't have an adequate pension plan. 69% rely on government NIS and old age pension. 56% have no property protection. And I remember sharing with the team before that I had the challenge of working with some teachers that retired, and they put all their money into a home, into their house. Man, they fixed the roof, they did everything, but they didn't have protection for the home. The house burned down, and that was it for them. You understand? The central bank is also saying 92% don't have critical illness. And you see what's going on there. If a critical illness comes in, you have to sell car, house, and so forth. And when you have when it's in a forced sale situation, right, where you don't have a choice, you don't get what it's worth, right? Here another stats: 70% of wealth transferred fail to arrive to the next generation, and 90% lose it in the third. So this whole idea of creating generational wealth. So all these things come down to one message. We all suffer from this disease, Mr. Joseph. It's called the PFP syndrome. All right.
Okay.
it's poor financial planning. I just wanted to underscore the value there.
Yes. Thanks for the points there. Recently in conversation, some friends and I were talking about a gentleman. He's actually a retired school principal, and this good gentleman will be turning 91 soon. So at this point, having retired as a principal, and at the time certainly a principal's salary, I mean, even in our present times, the principal's salary is more than your teacher's salary, and most of us might be banking on the 50% of your salary after you meet your 33 and a third.
Yes.
But when you live to be 70, 80, 90 years old, the erosive effect of time and inflation on the value of that 50% of your salary is significant. So at this stage, the little NIS pension is a lot more than what his teacher's pension, that 50% of his principal's salary is. Yeah.
Yes.
And
yes.
as I said, it's very possible that persons can move into retirement with inadequate pension plan. Tell us,
yes.
in terms of the two things, right? We're talking about the decline in the value of money over time and this thing called the compounding, right? Many of our teachers are in credit unions because we recognize that our credit unions are giving us a better return now than the banks are, right? You asked the question a little while ago. You said you asked people about what kind of return they're getting on their accounts. I guess most people by now realize that banks are paying 0.0 something percent, right? It may be 1% of 8%. But the credit unions are a little more generous, and Teachers Credit Union, for example, is still paying 5% per annum. What is the significance of compounding in terms of preserving the value?
Well, we see inflation as an example of how compound interest works in the reverse. All right. So I sit on a panel at Elders and Associates who they represent the Ministry of Education, and we cover the EAP program, Employee Assistance Program. And pretty often, this is the situation I have to face. You have people who retire and everything is fine. They're happy 5 years after is good. But by the time the 6, 7, 8 year, they're realizing that the money just doesn't seem to fit. You know, by the 10th, they're thinking about what do I need to do? By that time, they may not have the health, they may not have the motivation to do it. So compound interest is critical, and that's in the negative sense. In the positive sense, we're really talking about interest earning upon interest. So when you invest your funds, all right, that the rate at which you get is applied to that, and then that goes forward. All right. So let me give you a simple illustration. So if you take a simple interest situation, let's say you take $4,000 at about 8%, right? When you multiply that out, principal by rate by time, I'm sure we have some stalwarts here, right? You get just over $5,280, right? The interest there, because it's 4,000 invested, is just about $1,280. All right. If it's compounded, right? Meaning every time you earn money, it goes back onto the principal. And when you calculate your interest, you're calculating it on a higher amount every time, all right? You get $5,441, all right? So the interest there is at $1,442 against $1,200, you see. So some critical variables there would be the rate, amount saved, and time. And time is a big factor when it comes to compound interest, right? One of the rules, there's a rubric I often like to share called the rule of 72, right? And it gives you a kind of quick gauge as to how long your money will take to double, right? So 72 divided by the rate of interest gives you a sense of how long your money will take to double. In other words, if you're getting 1%, right? And you have $1,000 invested, Mr. Joseph, and those listening in, tell me how long that it takes to get 2,000. You see what's happening there? 72 years, all right? At 10%, it will take you about just over 7 years for that to double. You see the challenge we're facing here? The other thing, the other reason why compound interest works, and it's something that you need to question, and I think that's the thing, you know, we have to become more discerning and ask more questions around where we put in our money, right? Compound interest works with periods. right? So you would hear something say, along the line that it's compounded and applied annually, quarterly, monthly, or daily. All right. You find that the shorter the period, you're going to get even more money because of the number of compounding periods you have. So compounded daily will give you more money than monthly, will give you more money than quarterly compounded, and more money than annual compounding. You see what I'm saying? So wherever you can get the daily or monthly compounding, you should go for that as against the annual, right? You're going to find yourself earning a lot more money, right? So some things to take a note here to take advantage of compound interest. You want to invest early. The best time to start is now. All right. You want to invest often, right? Because there's also something called dollar cost averaging, particularly if you're doing mutual fund investments, which it works out that it becomes cheaper to invest if you invest often and regularly. All right. So things like your dividends, you want to reinvest that. And that's how the power of compound interest can work, all right, for us.
Awesome. And you really hit the nail on the head there as you ended. I have one of those little WhatsApp groups. I'm in a group with some teacher friends, and Teachers Credit Union, as I said, they're paying 5%. And over the years, colleagues all over the place, people talk about waiting for the dividends, and they withdraw those dividends and use it to, buy school books or to take a little vacation to help with the vacation or whatever miscellaneous expenses. We find nice ways to enjoy this little bit coming back. Yeah. But you made the point that we should leave the dividends and allow the compounding effect to grow that over time. I think
you probably want to use another instrument. The thing is, wherever you can maximize your return on investment, that's where you want to do it. So as much as you can leave it, I know all that would still be related to the goal and your time frames, but certainly as much as possible, leave it to reinvest and compound.
Right. Lovely. So the analogy that I've often heard, I like to use is, it's corn. We talk about corn, and you can take corn and you can plant it, or you can take corn and you can eat it, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
Yeah, everybody wants to break the barn, but nobody wants to plant the corn. So the reality is by leaving it, by reinvesting it, that we will see the growth over time. If I just put my $100 there and I take out the interest, then I'm going to be left with the $100 later on when it has less value. Is that right?
Yes, certainly. Of course, one of the key principles for creating financial wealth and independence is you are working hard. We are working hard for money, but we have to arrive at a place where money is working as hard as we are or harder. And that's how we get our money working for us. If we rely on our own strength alone, we won't get there. We have to have money employed, invested to earn the kind of returns we want. So that's how we have money working for us.
Now, I know you did your Financial Fridays talk. You talked about budgeting and I think bulletproofing your budget, right?
Yes.
And right, you signaled a little while ago that you like to take the practical approach. But before we get to budgeting, I want to take a step back and answer a question, a challenge that some teachers might pose to us, and that is, how am I supposed to save when I'm already struggling to meet my commitments as it is, right? Let me say at this point, before you respond, Roel, I see Desiree has posted a couple of things in the chat, and I want to invite participants. You're free to put your comments or questions in the chat. If there are questions, we'll try to get to them during the course of the discussion. Desiree says compounding is life, right? So Roel, how can I save? How can you be talking to me about investing when I'm struggling to make ends meet as it is? Any things to start? Can you give us any suggestions, any small suggestions?
Wow.
As to how
Yeah, it's again, it's one of those challenging questions because oftentimes the answer to that question relates to your personal situation, right? And an analysis, what a financial planner will do is look at your personal situation and then make recommendations, because you would be surprised. And it happens to me all the time. People come to me at elders and we sit and we go through their situation, and they didn't realize that there were all these opportunities because maybe they were saving at a particular place that wasn't working for them. And just by shifting it around, not by adding more money, right? They get more out of it by just shifting the funds around, all right? There's something called asset allocation. right? Asset allocation looks at the total pie, where you have all your money invested, and it asks the question, what's your average rate of return from all the various places? You have money in the credit union, you have it in the mutual funds, you have it in stocks. What's the average rate of return? Sometimes by simply just moving the amounts around, you can improve your rate of return. So that's one side of the equation, right? One of the things that was such a blessing in our session last Friday is that we pooled the responses from a variety of persons, right? So we asked persons, what are your own tips? And you'll be surprised, right? When it comes to how you manage your groceries, when you purchase, how you manage your vehicle, keeping your tires well pressured, you understand? Regular maintenance, do it yourself. You'll be surprised the range of things that you can do, right? To do more with less. All right. And one of the things we actually going to be doing, we're going to be putting up, because our program focus on 101 practical tips. So we're actually going to be putting that up, right? So persons can contact me if they're interested in getting some of those tips. And those tips came from the public. You know, people are saying this is the best time to go to Namdev, go market. This is the prices you're going to get. This is the best time to go to Extra Foods. You would be surprised, you know, how to repurpose things in your home. All right, keeping if you have stuff packed in your fridge, pack it in a certain way, and that cuts down on your energy saving, your cost. Mr. Joseph, it was really amazing, you know, the ideas that can come out to help you manage more with less. All right, so that's one part of it. But certainly, sitting down with a financial planner and looking at your situation, you could discover areas that you can help. But understand too that some of this comes from the group. One of the suggestions one person's made was buying in bulk, and of course their challenge was they couldn't buy in bulk on their own, but they came together with some of their colleagues and they bought in bulk, and they achieved quite a lot of savings. Right? So there are so many different ways that we can go to it. Some persons also shared how they were bartering, you know. So maybe I needed a haircut, right? And the barber's son needed some lessons, right? So I give the barber's son's lessons and I have haircuts free for the month. You understand? There are so many ideas came out, but it means sitting down, sitting back, pulling back a little bit and making an assessment of your situation. And there we can find areas that can help.
Thanks. I like that. You know, as you said earlier, financial well-being is not something that you just fall into, right? And so the very practical suggestions that you would have gotten from that group, those are the kinds of things that we're looking to bring forward so that our members can pick those things that would fit their respective situations.
Yeah, and I would encourage you, Mr. Joseph, even now, right? Create a bulletin board, you know, and start posting things that you are using, things that are helping you. And you're gonna get, you know, it's like crowdsourcing, you know, and you'll be surprised right within this group here, the amount of ideas that we can come up with at different persons. So you will learn some and you will give some and you'll be surprised, you know. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together.
Nice, lovely, lovely. And that spirit of collaboration and cooperation is something we definitely understand as a union. And in terms of the financial planning, financial management part of it, it's something that we are going now to work at building among ourselves collectively and working on together going forward. So I just shared in the chat the contact information, the various points that you made available to all. For those persons, as you're listening, there's information in the chat that you can copy and paste somewhere else. You can write it down. And we're going to make it available so that you can reach out to Mr. Rollox, reach out to him one-on-one for assistance and guidance. We are currently working on the new tutor website. Our General Secretary, Ms. Beckles, is spearheading that effort. And we are expecting within the next few months to have that up and running. And so I'm committing to this group here that we are definitely going to have our little financial corner and the bulletin board that Roll is talking about. We're going to provide the opportunity for members to share what they can offer and for members to come and benefit from what is being offered by others. So thanks to all for making that point. Now let's go back to the idea of budgeting. So those very many points and practical suggestions to be able to do more with less. Very, very valuable points. We take that. But if I'm now approaching the task of budgeting, right? Maybe I haven't been thinking deliberately about managing my finances in the past. We all know we're making some money and we have to spend on groceries and that kind of thing, and we might have a ballpark figure in mind. But if I want to approach the process of budgeting, can you give us 2 or 3 points, some do's and don'ts to bear in mind as we approach that?
One of the things that has happened over the years, pretty often, you know, when persons come, the budgeting issue comes up, and I have found, I would probably say 90% of the persons don't have a financial plan. So as a consequence, the budgeting goals are not clear. In other words, when you put together a budget, it's not just about making it through the month. No, you can be in a situation where it's about survival. So your goal is to survive. So your budget is set towards that. But outside of that, your budget, the whole idea behind having a budget, right, is to achieve certain goals in life, right? So you would have all these goals identified, and there must be a connection. In other words, you must be able to see the connection between your budget and these things. And every month you must be able to check to see, you know, am I getting closer to these goals because of this budget? So it's not just about saying, okay, I want to be able to pay this bill. I want to be able to buy this. I want to be able to go here. It is the overall goal. And that's the disconnect that I find pretty often, right? The other reason that's important, because this whole idea of goal setting and achieving goals, there's a psychological aspect of it, right? And the whole idea of being positive and having a positive mental attitude and shooting for something that is bigger than just the challenges that you face every day serves as a great motivation, right? So there's a lot of reasons why I would say goals is one of those things that you must have. The other thing I've noticed as well is sometimes persons are not using the appropriate budgeting method. Now, there are a variety of budgeting methods. You know, if you just Google, you'd realize, you know, there's the 50-20-30 budget, there's the zero-based budget, there's the no budget, there's the anti-budget. You understand? There are a plethora of budgeting types, and this fits each specific situation. All right. And some persons are using the wrong methodology. All right. So I think that's the other thing that we need to look at, right? One that we shared on Friday that actually resonated a lot was the old time envelope system, you know, where you assign things, you put it in envelopes and you seal it and you don't touch it. You understand? You would be surprised. And there's a gentleman that I'll refer to, Dave Ramsey, right? If many of you don't know the name, research him. He's sort of like the guru on budgeting, right? And even this is something even he recommends, and a lot of persons are using it. All right. Not only persons who are struggling and challenged, you know, persons who are financially independent are using some of these simple systems, the envelope system. So that's the other thing, right? The other challenge should be this whole idea being able to differentiate between needs and wants. And what tends to happen is, as our income increases, a lot of what we have, what we call wants, get converted into needs. And every time our income increases again, these wants get converted into needs. So what begins to happen is that every time our income increases, our expenses increase to match that increase. In other words, if your income increases by 5%, your expenses increase by 5%. And I like to ask the question, Mr. Joseph, if you're in a situation, if you look at two persons, right? One person is earning 2,000 and spending 1,900. Another person is earning 20,000 and spending 19,000. Which one of them are in a better situation? And pretty often, some persons may say the 20,000, but not necessarily. All right. They may be driving a bigger car. They may be in a fancier home. But the day their income becomes challenged, they're in the same situation. So, you know, that's another big part of it. The other thing too would be review. I found that persons are not reviewing. You have to spend some time, whether you do it daily, weekly. There's a book I like to recommend called The Millionaire Next Door, where they research the lives of millionaires and discover this to be a key thing. They track the expenses. All right. And this is thing where we like to think that a 1 cent or 5 cents, just 1 cent and 5 cents. No, it's about percentages. When you look at what that percentage, you'd realize how important it is, especially when you consider that your bank rate is point something percent or 1%. It should tell you can't play around with small, minute changes in your budget. You'd be surprised how over time it adds up, right? The other thing that I feel is lacking is that persons look at their budget, but the budget is not increasing, not leading to an increase in net worth. So it means that's something else you have to be tracking. Your assets versus your liabilities. And this is where one can determine whether or not you're getting wealthy or not. So are your assets increasing in relation to your liabilities? And that's one of the areas that budget's supposed to contribute to. So those are some of the things for now I'd say are important as I connect with persons that I see lacking.
Thank you. Very, very nice there. I think as we continue these conversations, we're going to share, book titles and other resources that people can draw. I typed something in the chat there just now, and then you named the book, right? The Millionaire Next Door, right? There's the poor versus poor, right? PAW is a term that they put forward in the book to describe one category of millionaires next door. And the PAW, prodigious accumulators of wealth. So most of us, it's very easy to spend money. We make money and we spend money. But some people actually create wealth through their careful management. As you said, the penny here, the few cents there, looking at all of those little bits and accumulating over time. So thanks for mentioning the book, The Millionaire Next Door. The concept is that, even in a room of teachers, while, we're all working in the same place, generating the same kind of income via the paycheck, there are millionaires among us. And what we need to do is to share information now. So while we may not all become multimillionaires, we can make better use of our resources and make sure we at least get to that point where we can describe ourselves as being financially independent. Yes, as being financially comfortable. So very, very interesting there. And you also made the point, salaries increase. And I saw somebody put up a heart just now when you got to that point, because it's very easy for us, and we've seen it over time. Some of us have been in the teaching service for a little while. I remember when I started as an assistant teacher, my first paycheck was $1,200, right? Nobody in the service is collecting $1,200 a month now. But over time, as the salary increases, our expenditure increases. And sadly, for many of us, the first thing we do is we spend the extra, right? And I'm sure if we talk with persons who understand financial planning and how to accumulate wealth, the first thing we should really be looking at is how to save and how to invest that. Yes?
Certainly. The whole idea of it really is asset accumulation, So it's a challenging topic because people draw this affinity to the assets that they've acquired. But really, if the things that you've acquired are not generating an income, is it really an asset? Is it really helping you or contributing? So even your home sometimes, people, we have this thing, this is my home, but some of us may be able to use that home, right? Either to rent out, or to buy and sell. Some of us may be able to do this thing. I met an individual, very interesting guy at the bank one day, and he was there in the bank with slippers, but he's a millionaire. And in his teenage years, he did something very interesting, Mr. Joseph. Everything that he took, he invested into building some property. At a very young age, you understand? He was buying tools, putting aside. He invested 10 years, you understand? Between 10 and 15 years, he told me, in just building this property. He didn't buy a car, he didn't do anything else, you understand? Now he has several properties, all right, earning and generating income. And he still went on to do a degree. He's a professor at the university now, but it's extremely comfortable. But again, we're talking here about discipline. We're talking here about delayed gratification. We're talking here about sacrifice.
Yeah, quite right. And I hear a couple of authors, a couple of books coming out there, and we will get to that. An hour is not a lot of time. Time is already fast spent, and there's so much more we could get into if we go into the details. But this afternoon, we're really just introducing some things for the to create awareness, yes, to create a little level of consciousness among our participants. And over time, we will seek to widen and to deepen the conversation. So we talked earlier about the erosive power of inflation. And I mean, all of us, we've heard stories from our parents, grandparents, about what they used to do with 2 cents and what they used to do with $2. And now we have to cater a couple $100 for that. And we talked about, the need for us to not just save, not just put the money in the bank, because participant made the point that we basically paying the banks to hold our money. But we should look at something that's going to generate income for us and generate wealth. Now, these days, when we talk about investment and making money, people think about these different schemes, a con artist, there's a con man out there trying to take my money. And we might even imagine that these people have a certain kind of look or image, right? In reality, over the years, there have been millionaires and purported millionaires running big schemes and big cons on people, right? Where in the Caribbean some years ago, we had a guy called Alan Stanford. Some of us would know the name and what happened with the 2020 cricket and how many cricketers are out hundreds of thousands of dollars because they decided to just roll the money over in this thing that he had going. And then there's Bernie Madoff, who would have steamed persons out of millions of dollars in the US. In recent times, we had our own experiences here with certain quote unquote susu, right? And flowers, plan, and that kind of thing. So, many of these things can be so appealing, so attractive. And people recognize that, I'm working hard for my money and I want my money to work for me. And so we see these things that are so appealing and we put our money there. But if we were to give a couple of pointers this afternoon as to, what we should look for, because we want to invest, we want to put our money somewhere where it's going to generate more than the 1%, and maybe even more. That's the 1% that the bank might offer you on a fixed deposit. We want to make more than even the 5%, which the credit union is offering now. But when I see the quote unquote opportunity that is offering a more attractive return, are there any things that you might be able to suggest we look at or look for so that we know this is something that's reasonably safe, or this is something that's real versus another scheme?
Yes, yeah. Well, one of the first things I'd mention, you mentioned it earlier, right, is this whole thing about cash. And there's a cash that you need that would help you acquire cash. And this cash is KASH, knowledge, attitude, skills, and habits, right? So I would say it first starts with investing in your own financial literacy. In what knowledge do you need to have? What attitudes do you need to adopt, right? What skills must you practice and behaviors, you understand? So I would say that's where it would begin. Do some research, right? Now I know this is a very difficult time because there's so much information, and some say anti-information and non-information out there. It can be very confusing, but I would say it begins there. Do some research. One of the things you're going to discover is that there's this thing called risk and return. It's a relationship, right? Generally, the higher the risk, the higher the return. And each of us would have what you call a risk tolerance, a propensity to take risk. Some of us can invest $100, right? And would not be able to sleep the next night because we're wondering, oh gosh, I just give this person this $100, but I wonder if I'll get it back. Some people put a couple $100 in a susu, and they're a legitimate susu, the regular susu, and they're wondering what's going to happen. They can't sleep at night, they're cold sweating. Each of us has a different propensity to take risks. So you'll find that some persons have tried pretty risky things and it has worked out for them, right? But it depends on your risk profile, which comes down to doing your own personal risk assessment. What is at stake, right? Is it that you have some asset at stake when you make your investment, right? Is it that your house will be threatened? Is it that key financial expenses will be threatened if you make this investment? That's a kind of a risk assessment you want to make. Ideally, from an investment standpoint, you want to invest your excess, not necessarily your basis. But then, as I told you, there's some persons who invest hard, they invest all that they have and they make it, right? Because they're willing to lose, right? But you want to exercise some kind of prudence, all right? The SEC and the FIU and the central bank maintain lists of investment programs and investors and brokers where the ones that are regulated, so you can have a sense of who are the ones that kind of fit, you know, the government regulation requirements. So that's one thing you definitely want to know, all right? Of course, oftentimes when the risk, when it's very high, it's generally an indication that, hey, something is happening here. When it exceeds the market tremendously. So you want to be able to investigate what is called the underlying instrument. The underlying instrument is if you put money into any kind of scheme or plan, what are they doing with the money? Very important. And don't get tied up with this thing that says it's a 100% guarantee. That doesn't exist. There's always some sort of risk. All right. So understand that there's always a risk. All right. If you have a fixed deposit, there's a risk that the sums that you've invested above the deposit insurance, above 120 something thousand, if something happens to that company, that money is at risk. You understand? So in Barbados, they realized even what the government guaranteed was at risk because the government bonds became junk bonds. You understand what I'm saying? So there's always some degree of risk, but we try to limit and mitigate these risks by making research, by examining our risk, making sure we're not overexposed when we make investment. So when we lose, we don't lose our whole shirt, right? Do the research and consider, can I have access to the funds? And how can I have access to the funds? What is the return I'm getting? All right. And what's the time frame that I have to invest in? And all of that ties back to your financial plan. In other words, your investment must fit your financial plan. Whatever you're investing in must contribute to those goals. So you must be able to see a direct link between that investment and the goal that you've identified. And oftentimes I tell people, if the person that you're talking to cannot connect with your overall financial situation and they're just saying to you, okay, let's take this money and invest it, that's probably somebody to watch out. So those would be some things I would say to consider.
Very, very nice. Very nice. Thanks, Roel. I want to just point again to a couple of the key things there, and it really starts with research, you know, because if you don't have the information, if you don't understand how the thing works, if you don't understand, as I said, the underlying instrument, I mean, some of these things can be very complicated, but we really need to have an overall sense of what we are getting into. And you mentioned the availability of resources on the websites of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the central bank, the FIU, that there are resources there that are designed to educate persons in terms of generally financial literacy as well as investment. And by preparing yourself, you're able to better participate in this thing. I tell people, doctors will answer the question on the level that they see you asking the question. If you know what to ask, you're going to get a very different answer, right? And so in finance and investment, we really need to go in with our own basic understanding of how this thing works, right? You also made reference to a couple of very important things. The SEC has a list of organizations and funds that they have evaluated, yes? And so that's one place that we could start. When we're looking at institutions and we're looking at different funds, one thing we can do is check the central bank website, we can check the SEC website and see whether those items, those instruments are listed there or not. And you also mentioned deposit insurance, because with certain accounts, there's an insurance on the $125,000 or what it is. And so that if the institution or a particular instrument fails, at least you know you're going to recover something good. I also want to endorse that very important point that we have to recognize we're taking risks, but we have to evaluate risk in terms of our position. If all I have to spare is that $10,000, then maybe I shouldn't put this 10,000 in that very risky thing, even though it might offer me a 20% and a 25% or double your money in 3 weeks. Sorry. Let's not be too specific, right? But
Yes.
if you are looking at risky investment that isn't insured, that isn't backed or evaluated by the SEC, then you also have to look at what losing that money is going to mean to your family.
Yes.
So we had a couple of persons asking questions, as to, where should I put a $300,000 for 4 years if I want to get something on that? And then somebody asked, what are your views on Bitcoins and Forex, right?
Sure.
So again, we are not, I know that Roll is not going to take the responsibility now to give specific advice as to where to put your $100 or your $300,000 or anything like that. But what are your general thoughts, Roll?
Well, the question would be, what's your plan? We go right back to the beginning. If you have $300,000, what do you want it to do for you? You understand? Is this something that's going to later on help you with a home, with a property? Is this just excess money? What is the goal? All right. Once we have the goal clarified, so for example, if you tell me your goal is you want certain funds within 1 year, then if you a fixed deposit for 3 years can't help you. You understand? So that's why it's more important to understand the goal. What I would say though, right, is yes, I see annuities are excellent investment. If we had more time, I'll explain to you, it's one of the greatest investments ever. What I like to say is that when it comes to investing that $300,000, you want to explore, you'd probably want to diversify a little bit, right? Of course, I will have to assess your risk profile. So in other words, if you're an individual, you're still at home, you understand, my advice you would be totally different to if you're an individual with 3 children, you're living with your mother-in-law is living with you, and one of your children are sick. It's a whole different ball game. You understand? So those are the things that impact upon where I would say to put your money. But as far as emerging trends, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, Forex trading, I will encourage persons who have the leeway in their particular situation to begin to explore this, right? Because the returns are really better than what we're seeing now. And even central banks are investigating it. It is certainly the way for the future. Central banks are coming out with their own cryptocurrency. So you want to be able to understand these instruments because they are going to be, I was amazed to find out how many young persons were trading in Bitcoin right here in Trinidad and Tobago, buying cars, buying this, I was really amazed. So you certainly want to begin putting some money towards some of these investments, almost like test the market, right? I would certainly endorse, of course, not all investments are the same, and there are schemes and scams out there, even in Bitcoin and so forth, right?
Yes, again, so the disclaimer, folks, nothing here is to be taken as advice on what to do with your money, but these are general guidelines, general things pointing you to what to look for and how to approach things. Going back, Roll, as tutor treasurer, I went to the central bank website not too long ago. We looked at the firms that are listed on the SEC website, and there are institutions there offering rates 1 year, 2 years that are a lot more attractive than what your bank account is offering, right? So again, people explore, but know that there's risk in all of the institutions, all of the instruments. There's no guarantee on any. In fact, you will see that when you go to sign the paper, whether you go to a stockbroker or you go to any institution where they have a particular fund, right? The statement role, I think, is what past performance is not an indicator, is not to be an indicator
Of future, yes. It doesn't guarantee future performance at all. But one of the things you certainly want to do, I mentioned you would asset allocation. And if you're going to investment brokers and all these persons, you'd want to investigate that and do some research on it. Because what it does, you invest in such a way to balance out your risk, which is what you really want to do. So that if one element doesn't do well in one market or one area, the other area will do well. So for example, anybody who has invested in pharmaceuticals, medical, hospital, sanitation, right now would be doing pretty well. So if you had an investment in bleach, you would have been making a killing right now. So understand that you have to then balance off your portfolio, and this is what asset allocation does.
Right. Nice. Thank you. So again, people are sharing in the chat about their experience, and they also further questions on the issue of cryptocurrency. As you said, Raul, we see central banks in different countries assessing it. We've seen one or two countries, I think in Latin America, actually adopt cryptocurrency as legal tender. In the last week, on the other hand, we saw China, and of course, China is a different kind of fish.
That's a whole ball, another ball game.
Right, but we saw China saying, look, all cryptocurrency is illegal. That may not necessarily be an indicator of their assessment of whether this thing is a good investment or not. It may be simply based on their philosophy and approach to economics, right? But there are many, many variables and moving parts. Question, what are your thoughts on shares? I guess that means investing in the stock market.
Well, this is what I would say. Shares generally are good, all right? But no two shares are the same. So again, you will need to understand your goals. Some shares are likely to give you a return in a short time. Some shares you have to hold for much longer. In general, though, you'll find that shares are a long-term type of investment, all right? It's not a quick thing, although there are some people who go into the thing where they time the market, right? But prudent financial planners will tell you it's not about timing, ing the market, but time in, in the market, all right? So, you want to spend sufficient time, medium to long term, for those things to really benefit. I would say on the whole, though, and this is to give support to that entrepreneurship session coming up, that quite a lot of things, shares, all these things are down. And we're really facing a different kind of world. And a lot of things, unit trust, for example, at one time paid 50%. Could you all imagine that? We're not likely to return to those kinds of things. We're going to have more conservative types of returns. For me, it highlights the value of business, investing in a business, either your own business or another. All right. Of course, that comes with its own set of due diligence and preparation, but you will find that more often than not, business will outstrip any return that you can get on the market. But there's a way to do it. So you may find somebody who has a skill, they have a talent, they can do hot dog, they can do a food cart, but they don't have the money. That could be an investment for you, or maybe you can do it yourself. So I certainly want to endorse that as well, because stocks and shares and all these things are down right now,
Yeah, and we've seen over time. I mean, when we talk about the stock market, of course, you have different perspectives again, different philosophies as to how you approach the market. Diversification and speculation, and then you have the Warren Buffetts who say, just get in, find something good and hold on to that.
And hold on to it.
Right.
The big thing to yes, sorry, I just wanted to put in very carefully. The big thing to remember there is that when you're dealing with shares, it's unrealized gains. All right. So your share price could be $10 a day and $20 tomorrow, and you're very happy. But the day that you need it, you understand, the share price can go back down. So it's unrealized gains. That's why some people adopt the idea of buying and selling rather than, they don't want to wait. Maybe the price might go down and not come back up. They can't take that, their risk tolerance doesn't allow for it. So just some things to note.
A very important point. Thank you. And while we've gone over time, and we're just going to take a few extra minutes to try and tie up a few things. We also talked about investing in your own business or somebody else's business. And that's important as well, because we know that entrepreneurs are the majority, the world's richest people, the majority of the world's richest people are in fact entrepreneurs, having either built their own business or worked along with others in building businesses. And while we think about guys like Gates and Zuckerberg, it's happening right here in the Caribbean. One of the big examples in recent time was with WePay, right? So that whereas you have your, what do you call these people? Your big money transfer firms, the big brands out there, the Western Union and that kind of thing. We've had entrepreneurs in the Caribbean region building up their own brands. And WePay within the last year, I think, was bought out by one of the major international players, right? And of course, we've seen with the available technology, many technology-based businesses coming up in Trinidad and Tobago, people providing services in terms of, you know, the transport, the ride-sharing approach, people providing the delivery and other service type approaches, service type businesses using technology. So that entrepreneurship is definitely something that we should be looking at. And I'm confident that, you know, we probably have one or two in the room, because among our teaching fraternity, as I said, we have the millionaires, we have the entrepreneurs, we have the stock market savvy investors. And so this is really about trying to expose more people to the information, to the options, and to the strategies that they can use to work at improving their own financial position and achieving financial well-being. So there are just a couple more comments coming in. We're moving to wrap up because, you know, we don't want to overextend ourselves, and we really are looking at building a series where we're going to get into specific topics in more detail, right? But before we close, let me read this one here for us, and then I'll take your closing comments. So question from Javance: housing will always be in demand. So that's why I believe in real estate. And that's very good. Thanks, Javance, because we didn't touch on that particular element in our discussion. Real estate as an investment strategy. Well, actually, you did. You mentioned somebody who started out there. Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Of course.
And just give us some closing comments, Ron.
Yes, of course. And there's a way to do it. So coming up, we're going to be doing a session where we're going to be unmasking and decoding this whole idea of how to use real estate and property to create financial independence, right? How do you start with one property and go on to your second property and your third property? How do you do that? People are doing it all the time, but how is it done? All right. So this is something that, yes, we're going to be covering it on our Financial Fridays. So once you're on and you like the page, you're going to get information about when that session is coming up. We're going to be bringing in some experts who are going to be speaking to how it has been done in Trinidad and Tobago. Not just, you know, some people try to talk about real estate in America and other places. It's different, right? How you do it in Trinidad is a little different. So we're going to focus on how it's done here. How can you use property and real estate to create wealth? All right. In terms of closing comments, I would say a big word is pivoting. And I would like to encourage us to investigate that word a little bit. All right. What is a pivot? We are at a turning point. And we've had several turning points in the history of the world. You understand? What you will discover when you examine a pivot is that a pivot comes disguised as hard times, as challenges, as, you know, you can't make your way. That really is a pivot point, right? Because in it is an opportunity. So if you examine any of the top 500, the companies in the States, Microsoft, Google, all these companies came out of adverse situations, depression, and challenging economic times. If you examine every pandemic we've had in the past, you're going to see inventions and creations and innovation unrivaled. You understand? A lot of what we do today, you understand, even this platform we're on right now came out of pandemics and challenging times. So what does that say to us? It means that we have to make a mental shift. And part of that mental shift is to understand how value is being created. Value is not being created by having a job and this thing called a job description or a job title. How do you create value in the world is how wealth is attracted to how you create value. And I'll just leave people with those thoughts there. All right. So we have to be prepared to examine something new, do something different, investigate. Earlier, we spoke about the cash. You want to have the right knowledge, the attitude, skills, and habits if you're going to get cash flow. You understand? CASH. All right. So I will leave that with persons and encourage everyone to take some time and invest in developing a financial plan. You are going to be amazed what happens at the end. You understand? If you take some time and you develop a financial plan, it's going to change your life. So I will leave those with you, and certainly, you can be a part of our Financial Fridays every Friday. You can check us out on our Vision Works Solutions Facebook page, and you can get more information on what we do.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Rolex. Financial Fridays, folks, that's something else to look out for. And we really want to say, well, thanks for sharing your experience this afternoon. I'm sure from the feedback that we've had so far that members really appreciate the insights, and we're looking forward to continuing the conversation. So all our tutor members in the room, thank you for being here and participating in the discussion. We've had some contributions in the chat, and we're looking forward to a lot more interactive discussions as we go forward. In a couple of weeks, we're going to have the month of the teacher, and we're going to have that session on entrepreneurship. The first vice president is organizing so that every Sunday there's a different installment, and one of those is focused on financial related matters. So we'll have that entrepreneurship session. And in November, hopefully we'll all be back here to continue our discussions on this. Well, we're definitely going to invite you back. And
love to be back.
Let me just tell everybody that we will be publishing a questionnaire, right? We're not going to put the link out just now, but we will be publishing that questionnaire so that during the coming weeks, we'll be able to gather the information and based on that, give a more focused response, have our discussion focused around the things that you, the tutor members, are interested in talking about. So that when we come back in November, that's where we want to be. All right. So look out for that when it comes out. Roll has already developed a questionnaire for us to work on. And so when we come back, we'll be able to focus on those things that you want to talk about. So again, thank you for being here, everybody, for our first Money Talks Sunday session. And I'm looking forward to talking some more with you about personal financial planning and about tutor finance. We had a session that's probably a couple of months ago, but we had a session with one of our district executives. They invited me in, and we talked about how we use that $100. People are paying their subscriptions, and we want to know how we're using that. And so we can have that kind of conversation as we go forward, because we want everybody to be involved in what tutor is doing, and then all of us grow together in our consciousness of personal financial management. That's going to mean good things for us as individuals and good things for us as an organization. So again, thanks everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Ron, take care. Thanks again.
Take care. Okay, guys.